Hello, my name's Jimmy Adcock, and as well as representing Jay on our A to Z journey, I am the product manager for the ABEM brand at Guideline Geo. I thought, well, we're covering the instruments pretty well with the rest of the alphabet, so it might be interesting to answer a couple of questions that I get asked fairly regularly about why it is that I came to work for Guideline Geo, why I still enjoy working for them, and what is a product manager. So before I attempt to justify my presence here and answer the second question, I'll start with how and why I ended up where I am today. I was a geophysics surveyor and I worked for a company for about 13 years before I joined Guideline. And I knew the company. Mike Langton, who works with the GPR products, he had sorted us out with a mirror multi-channel GPR system for my previous employer. And we stayed in touch, and I was having a chat with him one day, and he said, "Oh, Guideline are looking to expand their support department and build an applications team that is populated primarily with people with a lot of field experience who would understand the frustrations of customers when doing support, but also be able to feed back good ideas into the development process." And although I hadn't used an ABEM system since I was at university in the late 90s, something about that conversation sparked an interest in me. And I think it was the fact that as a surveyor, I often felt frustrations with trying to get support, understanding of the problem that I was having, or, why I kind of felt there was an issue. And also the kind of disconnect between hardware and user experience. So lots of different geophysical bits of equipment, have the most fantastic electronics inside the box. But you often felt a little bit let down at the point where you actually had to use it. It felt like the user interface kind of came last in the whole development process, and so some buttons were thrown on the front for you to be able to run the machine. And all of a sudden, here was an opportunity for me to be a part of the solution. And here was a company who were committing to building better support that better represents the people who actually use the instruments at the end of the day. And I thought that was a great thing. So that was enough to get me to want an interview. Then I thought, well, I'd better do some research because, as I say, I hadn't used an ABEM product for a while. And I knew ABEM had been around for quite a long time, but I didn't realise just how long. So, nerd alert, I'm going to show you my favourite book now, which is this one. It's called, where's the camera? There you go. It's called Applied Geophysics by Even Keys. And this book was written in 1929. So in the introduction, it says this is probably the first textbook on geophysics. And it's basically describing this new branch of science that is emerging. And I'd encourage you to look it up. And if you do nothing else, just read the first page and a half. The introduction is the most wonderful bit of text you'll ever read about geophysics. But as I say, this was written in 1929, and by that point, ABEM had already been around for some 6 years. And I just thought, why wouldn't you want to be a part of that heritage? A company that has been around from the emergence of geophysics all the way through to the present day. And, why wouldn't you want to be a part of that lineage? So that really drew me in as well. And then the final thing was when I went for the interview, they demoed some of the equipment for me, and the first thing I used was the Terameter LS, the resistivity meter. And it was like a breath of fresh air. They put in front of me a product that, to my mind, felt as if the user had been at the center of the development process. The user interface was easy to use, it was intuitive, took you through step by step. There were little design touches in there that, simplified survey that would only have come from the experience of someone who had worked in the field. And I thought, this is good. This is what I want. This is the kind of instrument I'd like to use. And so that really sealed it for me. That meant I wanted to come and work with this company. And I think that's something that we do very well at Guideline Geo. ABEM and Marlow both produce instruments that, don't overwhelm the user. In an ideal world, yes, everyone who uses a geophysical instrument is an experienced geophysics and is experienced in geophysics and knows what they're doing. But that's just not the reality. There's a very broad spread of experiences in our customer base. And also in survey companies, quite often the people who go out and have to do the hard data collection are at the very beginning of their careers. The people with the experience are rightly doing the interpretations, the processing, that value added at the end of the process. But the people in the field are quite often the newer employees, and they might not have a huge experience geophysics. So there shouldn't be a barrier to collecting good quality data. The instrumentation should help you go out, collect good quality data to bring back to the office, and then do the analysis and interpretation on. And sometimes I felt that the complexity of using a system meant that it clouded your ability to understand what were the key principles that were going to give you good data at the end of the day. And I think Marla and ABEM both present instruments that allow you to bring back good data relatively easily. So that was really what drew me in. And now, as a product manager, being able to sort of drive the products forward, drive the development, maintain the products that we do have, I feel like now I've taken another step in terms of helping guarantee that we can do that into the future. So that brings me on to what is a product manager. It's a job title that kind of covers an awful lot of roles, but the obvious side of it is we have a range of products and we need to maintain them and ensure that we can continue to build them into the future. But we also have to succession plan. What's going to come next? What's the next generation of systems? Are there technologies that we want to incorporate? Are there application areas that we want to move into? Or are there just changes in working practices, which means that a slight redesign of the instrumentation will actually allow customers to work more effectively with these new ideas about how geophysics data might be collected. So that's the sort of obvious side. Then there's kind of businessy sides where we need to be able to make sure we know where we sit in the marketplace, who are our competitors, how are we working against them, do we need to make changes to stay competitive and stay relevant. We need to be able to communicate what our products do. As I said earlier, not everyone is a trained geophysicist. And so a lot of people might be looking at geophysics from a fairly inexperienced background, if we're honest. And we need to be able to explain what the systems do, what benefits they bring to those customers, who, if I threw a technical specification at them, wouldn't necessarily be able to pick out exactly what the benefit of that system was. So communication is quite a big one. And then finally, sort of networking, building relationships with other institutions, companies, individuals, where the sharing of knowledge is beneficial to both of us. And it may be in the drive to develop new technology or to move into new application areas where either a particular method or geophysics itself hasn't been used before. And so those are all really interesting things to do. But to be a great product manager, you can't sit in your little office surrounded by your precious orange boxes and work in isolation. It's just impossible. So as a product manager, I'm not doing most of the hard work. The hard work has been done by the fantastic teams that are around me, and I'm very lucky at Guideline to have that. So it's our hardware and software engineers in the development office in Umeo who are driving us forward and taking the ideas and making them into a reality. It's the electronic engineers in the factory who know the inside of the instruments like the back of their hand. It's our sales teams who are feeding back information about the marketplace. It's our Marcom team who help us communicate the products. And especially it's our applications team who are my favourites. You're not supposed to have favourites, but I was an application engineer when I started, so that's where my heart lies. But they're the people who are delivering training and support and doing demos and workshops. So they're on the ground with the instruments, with the customers, and they are seeing how customers interact with the products. They can have a good conversation sort of with shared backgrounds about frustrations, what people find good, what people find bad, and feed all of that back to us so that when we develop the next generation of instrumentation, again, the user is sort of front and center. So as a product manager, you have all of these really talented people around you, and what your role is to take information from them, the ideas, the constraints, and find us a path through that so that we can continue to develop good, relevant, usable geophysics equipment that sits well within the geophysics sector. And I'm incredibly proud to sit here and do that role and be a part of Guideline Geo and represent the ABEM brand. And I'm just very excited about where we can go in the future, looking at what we have in the pipeline. And it's exciting times to be a product manager for ABEM and sit here at Guideline Geo.